Welcome, fellow bookworms, to Tibra's Den. My name is Whitney, and we are reading Stormfront by Jim Butcher. Just finished chapters 16 through 20, so those are the chapters we are discussing today. We do have some other things to discuss, but as always, if you're not quite caught up to that point, don't hesitate to jump off after we finish talking about everything else, and that way you can get caught up and then rejoin us to participate in the discussion questions. And of course, if you haven't started reading it, it is never too late. There's links in the description below where you can pick it up, and I do hope you will, because we are going to continue on with the Dresden File series, which I will talk about in a second. And so you definitely want to read this, and that way you can continue to read the series with us. So, but like I said, before we jump into that, as I announced previously, we are doing weekly reads now, and the first weekly read was Carrie, and I've already discussed that. That video should have come out last Wednesday, and this Wednesday we will be discussing Dean Koontz' Demon Seed. This was our weekly read for this past week, and so yeah, we're going to be discussing this book on this Wednesday, and you can kind of get my thoughts on it and see if it's something you're interested in if you haven't read it already, or see if you kind of agree with my thoughts if you were participating and reading it along with me. So I'm excited to do that. And then, of course, this Wednesday, the 25th, we are going to be reading Anne McCaffrey's Freedom's Ransom, and we'll start this, like I said, the 25th through the 1st. And then, of course, in order to give you guys time to pick up books in case you are interested, I'm going to go ahead and announce the next weekly read, so that way you have about a week with some extra days added on to pick up the book. And so for September 1st through the 8th, we are going to be reading Witch and Wizard by James Patterson. And reading the synopsis, I'm pretty sure I did read this book already, but again, I don't really remember it, and so I'm excited to read it again. But real quick, I'll go through the synopsis with you, and that way you can see if it's something that you might be interested in. So, meet Wisty and Wit. Excuse me. Meet Wisty and Wit, a witch and a wizard and the world's only hope. Wit and Wisty, all good, are a brother and sister who are torn from their family in the middle of the night, slammed into prison and accused of collusion, conspiracy, and experimentation with the dark and foul arts. And they're not alone. Thousands of young people have been kidnapped. Some have been accused and many others remain missing. For the ruling regime will stop at nothing to suppress music and books, art and creativity, and magic of any kind. But the siblings are more powerful than they know, and they are the only thing standing in the way of the most evil tyrant the world has ever seen. And so, yeah, really excited. Like I said, I think I've read it before because it sounds familiar based on the synopsis, but my memory is so horrible, so I'm excited to read this again. So again, if you want to participate, the links are down in the description below. So definitely pick up a copy and join me as we read it, like I said, September 1st through the 8th, and then I'll be discussing this book on September 8th. So now that you're all caught up on the weekly reads, I just want to remind you this next week is the last week that we are reading Stormfront. And so we're going to finish off the chapters. We're going to read 7 chapters this week. But I just want to remind you that next month we are going to be reading V.C. Andrews' My Sweet Audrina. We'll start this on August 30th. And that way we can discuss it starting Monday, the 6th of September. So if you haven't already got a copy, again, pick yourself up one, and that way you can join us and then check back so you can participate in the discussion questions. I am really, really excited to read this one. I can't wait to get started on it. And then, like I mentioned previously, we are going to be continuing the Dresden series. And so we're going to start Full Moon, and I wanted to go ahead and start reading this August 28th. So once you're finished with Stormfront, go ahead and start in on this one, and then we will be discussing this, the first set of chapters on September 4th rather. So like I said, finish up this one and then immediately jump into Full Moon. And like I said, then we're going to discuss. We're not going to do discussion questions on the rest of the series, but I am still going to kind of break it down by chapter and like key points throughout the series that kind of made me think. So I'm really excited to jump into this. Like I said, August 28th, we'll start reading this and then we'll discuss it the following Saturday. It's going to be series Saturday. So, really excited for that. Definitely make sure you pick yourself up a copy. But now that that's all out of the way, let's go ahead and jump right in to our discussion questions. So, like I said, if you're not quite caught up, don't worry about jumping off this video and then rejoining us once you have caught up. But of course, we're starting with chapter 16. For a second time, Harry is assaulted by Johnny Marcone's muscle, who, as we learn, is working both sides. What mistakes led to his downfall? And I think the biggest mistake, I think he was kind of successfully working both sides, but his biggest mistake was one, underestimating Harry, and two, not really educating himself on magic. Especially, dealing with all that and then dealing with Harry, who's a wizard on behalf of this other magical entity. Like, I think those were the two big points that led to his downfall. I think Johnny Marcone probably would have figured it out. I mean, he's very intelligent, so I think he would have figured it out at some point that there was a leak in his crew there. But I think, just him, he assaulted Harry. I'm assuming we're pretty confident that it was on behalf of Johnny Marcone the first time, and then the second time it was on behalf of this other, magical entity, another wizard or whoever it is. And, he grabbed the hair, which Harry recognized it as the same guy who assaulted him the first time, under, Johnny Marcone's rule. But then grabbing his hair, he realized, no, that's a link to magic and they can use that against me. So I think he just underestimated Harry for sure, and then not understanding magic, knowing that Harry probably would have been able to track him and find him was a big mistake on his part and definitely led to his downfall. So Harry compares the new wizard to a gawky teenager. Do you agree with Harry that experience and training count for a lot more than raw power? And it kind of goes back to the age-old question, age and wisdom versus youth and, strength or whatever. And I think, I personally believe that wisdom always wins out, because especially, I mean, I think youth can, or new, fresh, because I don't think, the guy who's doing this is necessarily young. He's just new to the craft. And he has a lot of raw power, and he's able to harness a lot of raw power is the key, and why he's, doing these things that typically would be for a more experienced wizard, but he doesn't fully understand everything, where Harry has the knowledge, and that's gotten him out of those, with the demon attacking him and everything else. Having that knowledge and really knowing his craft has been allowed him, to really utilize the resources. And I think if you don't have that knowledge and you just have that raw power, you're not necessarily gonna be as efficient. And a more experienced wizard's gonna see holes in what you're doing and be able to kind of, use those holes either against you or to get out of, the situation. So I think, wisdom and experience and knowledge always count for more than just raw talent or raw power or youth or anything like that, for sure. So that's my thoughts on it. But next up is chapter 17. Harry makes a show of power when confronting Johnny Marcone and Gimpy. What were the pros and cons of this? And I think a pro was showing, that he is a force to be reckoned, that he's not going to be walked all over. He's not just going to take it. And he does have power, and he can stand up for himself. I think doing it on such a grand scale was like, look, I'm not putting up with this. He wasn't tiptoeing around or anything like that. But I think the big con was he did it publicly, and he also kind of lost control of the situation. And so the situation just kind of spiraled because it was just, he was just running in there like he wasn't trying to have like a slow conversation and making sure, there were no missteps. He was just like, this is what's happening, and, you're gonna listen to me essentially. And so I think that was the big one. Like, yes, the show of power was really great because it's like, look, I'm not gonna be messed with, and this is the way it's gonna be. You're not gonna, bully me around. I can fight you, and I have power in my own right. But at the same time, he kind of lost control because he wasn't careful with it, and I think that was the big mistake he made. So for the moment, Harry and Johnny seem to have reached a mutual understanding. Though, as Harry puts it, he is still screwed. Do you think Harry is better off than he was at the beginning of the chapter? And even though his situation does look pretty bleak, I think he is better off because for the moment, he does not have Johnny Marcone gunning for him. Johnny Marcone just kind of wants to wait and see what happens with their mutual enemy before he makes a move. And so, they have that mutual enemy. And so at the moment, like I said, Johnny Marcone's not saying he's not an enemy anymore, but he's not gunning for him. Like, he's gonna wait and see. And I think he did give him an important clue. Like, we don't know how it's gonna play into it yet. And he didn't have a lot of information on who this guy might be, but he did say, everybody he's talked to that works for him has said that he always stays in the shadows. And I think that's an important clue. And so I think, he is better off because he does have more information than he did, even though it's not much. And then also, he no longer has Johnny Marcone after him. Um, so that's one less faction he has to deal with that's after him. So I do think he's better off, even though he's still not in a good place at all, for sure. So next up is chapter 18. Harry thinks about his father. Why does he see his father in a positive light when most wouldn't have? And I think Harry truly saw his father for who he was. Like, yes, he saw his downfalls, and those were the things most people would have condemned him for. He wasn't around. He was kind of chasing this dream and didn't make a lot of money to support his family, things like that, which most people would kind of criticize for sure, and condemn somebody for that alone without seeing who they were as a whole person. Where Harry kind of looked at his father and, looked for what his mom was attracted to in his father, and he saw a kind person who really didn't care about money, like just really, or material gain, like just wanted to make people happy. And so he saw, yes, he saw his father's flaws, but he also saw, who he was as a person. And I think that's was really beautiful. And I thought, the way he kind of portrayed his father when in his memory and everything. He said most people would have condemned him, but Harry kind of saw him in a positive light. And yeah, he probably wasn't the best father, and he probably could have done a lot more for Harry's mom and Harry himself. But at the end of the day, that's who he was. And there was a kindness about him, and so I thought, just Harry portrayed his father as a very real person, but also didn't condemn him for his shortcomings or whatever you want to say. However that saying goes. So, next up, let's see. Harry takes a big risk going back to Linda Randall's. Was going back worth the risk? And I do think it was worth the risk because he got a lot of information from that visit, and he kind of got a renewed sense of purpose too, which he was really feeling down. Like, he was really, really feeling down. And he didn't intentionally go back. He kind of wandered there, and then he decided to go in. But I think if he hadn't gone there, he wouldn't gotten the clue that he did, and he wouldn't been able to talk to that guy. So if he hadn't been able to do those things, he really would have been stuck. Where because he was able to do those things, he got very important information that he can now use to go forward and try to save himself. So I thought it was very important that he went, and if he had decided not to, he would never gotten those clues, and he would have just been, at the mercy of everything. He probably would have been dead because the wizard has his hair now. And so I think that was a very important move on his part that he made, even though he didn't do it intentionally. It was kind of more intuitively, but very important for sure. And on to chapter 19. Harry tries to pass himself off as a cop. If he had been able to keep up the facade, would he have been able to get more information or less? And I honestly think he probably would have gotten less information just because that guy was very squirrely when he thought he was a cop. And so I think, why he would have got probably been able to pull certain information out because he was making it more official. The guy kind of relaxed a little bit once he realized that Harry wasn't a cop. Like, yeah, he was like, I don't have to tell you anything because you have no authority. But at the same time, he was a little bit more relaxed. And so I think Harry did get more information out of him than he would have if he had continued on with the cop facade. Um, but at the same time, there's no way to know for sure. Like, the guy might have squealed more information too. Like, who knows? But I think the guy gave all the information he did. But unfortunately, Harry did lose the pictures because he that was part of his deal to get information from the guy. So that was kind of a loss. But overall, I think he probably got the most information because the guy kind of relaxed a little bit, not knowing that he wasn't an actual cop. So. And then at this point, we are learning how the two cases tie together. Looking back, what clues were there that the two cases were tied together? And the biggest one, when I mentioned this in the beginning, was when Harry was at the lake house and, he's gathering information, and the fairy and then also the pizza guy were talking about like the fairies called it a sporting event, which meant, like a sexual encounter type event. And then the pizza guy mentioned that there was multiple people there as well. So I think that was kind of a clue again because in the beginning I said it made me think of Bianca. So, and excuse the puppy barking as always. A theme in these videos. I can't keep her quiet. So, and then for another clue, like I mentioned before, even though it kind of had weak bearing, was Morgan. Just the timing of Morgan showing up, which again he was following Harry, and Harry did trap the fairy, and so it made sense like he could have shown up, but just him showing up there and then also accusing Harry of the murders, but showing up at the lake house itself kind of made me think that there might be connection there as well. And then, of course, the big one is the magical connection because you have this dark wizard that's killing people by magic, and then you have this new Victor Sells who's apparently new to magic and is on the scene when he hasn't been on the scene before. And so that's kind of a big clue, I think, as well. So, next up, we're on to chapter 20. At this point, we can pretty confidently say Victor Sells is the one practicing dark magic. But how does he tie to Johnny Marcone and 3i? And I think I'm not really entirely sure, but there is a connection there, which that's one of the next question is talks about the connection with his wife. So his wife knew the victims, in particular Linda Randall, which is my next question. So I think it has something to do with her connection to them, and maybe, maybe he was connected to Linda because his wife connection with her, and then she connected him to Tommy Tom and like the drug, and maybe Tommy Tom was playing both sides as well. Like, who knows? Like, I don't really see that, but it's a possibility. But somehow there's a connection there, and that's how he got tied, I think, to Johnny Marcone, and maybe think, hey, like maybe I can do something with magic and drugs to make some money. And so I think that's kind of how he ties, like something with the connection that deals with his wife and everything. Maybe connected him over on that side. I'm still not really sure, so I'm really excited to read on and find out. But the next question is, Monica seems very familiar with the victims, especially Linda Randall. What do you think her connection is? And so Harry mentioned that she looked familiar to him. And so I think it might be like a family connection, in particular to Linda, and then maybe she met Jennifer Stanton because Linda, or maybe she was one of Bianca's girls at one time too. Like, it's really hard to say. Like, I'm not entirely sure. But I do think like there's a family, just because the way he mentioned her look makes me think family. And so that's why I think maybe Linda was her sister or something like that. And that was the connection. And then, of course, that ties to Tommy Tom and Jennifer Stanton and everything like that. But I still don't understand, like, unless she was like one of Bianca's girls as well, or was like really familiar with what her sister used to do. If Linda is her sister, I still don't understand how it really ties to Tommy Tom and why she would be familiar with him, other than he's just one of Johnny Marcone's, main guys. Like, I really don't fully understand the connection, but that's my tentative connection right now until we read further and learn what the actual connection was. And so you'll have to let me know your thoughts in the comments below. But that is it for these chapters. And like I said, this week we are going to go ahead and finish up the rest of the book. So chapters 21 through 27 are what we were reading this week. And then we will discuss these next Monday when we will start V.C. Andrews' My Sweet Audrina for the next book of the month. And then, of course, make sure you check out the weekly reads. And then on Saturday, definitely go ahead and jump into Full Moon, or whenever you finish up Stormfront, jump right into Full Moon, because we will be discussing that Saturday, September 4th. So definitely want to be all caught up. And, of course, in the description below, you can find links to where you can get all these books, as well as the breakdown of the chapters for the books we are reading. So anyway, that's it for today. Happy reading, everyone. Bye.